Good morning, everybody, and you're all very welcome to this, the fourth and final in the current MyMind webinar series, devised to offer some practical advice and supports for people who are struggling with the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Gráinne O'Rourke and I'm Head of Communications at MyMind, and I'm delighted that so many people have gotten involved in this webinar series, and we sincerely hope that you have found it helpful and have taken something useful from it. So before we get to the main event, just a couple of housekeeping issues. Obviously, we're dealing with the technology here, so anything can and will go wrong. So just bear with us in case it does, and we'll try and get things back on track as quickly as we can. Also, to let you know that this event is being recorded, as have the 3 previous webinars, and it will be available around the middle of next week on MyMind's YouTube channel, and you will also receive an email from Eventbrite with the link to it. As I say, the 3 previous webinars are already there, so if you weren't in a position to attend or you missed some of them, they're available to you to watch, and each of them is well under an hour and includes the Q&A session at the end. So again, as I said, I'd like to thank everybody for participating. I would like to hand over now to Annalisa, who's going to deal with the challenging topic of how to manage difficult emotions. Good morning, Annalisa.
Hi, good morning, Gráinne, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're gonna talk about the topic of emotional well-being and difficult feelings that we are faced with, especially at this time during the pandemic. Just to introduce myself briefly, I've been with MyMind for over 2 years. I initially qualified in psychology, then in counseling psychotherapy, specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy. I offer counseling in different languages, English, Italian, and Spanish, and I have a good knowledge and the background of culture and languages. Let's start with the main discussion points here.
Are the slides stuck?
They are. I'm just going to restart them. Apologies about that. Bear in mind, bear for 1 second. Okay. Apologies about that. So the main discussion points for this webinar are emotional well-being. Okay, how can we deal with our emotions? What's the difference between our emotions and our feelings that we experience on a daily basis? When looking at those, we will focus particularly on sadness, shame, and anger. Some of the emotions that have become very, very common these days during the pandemic, and lots of people present with this issues. We will look at how we experience them and how we can manage them. We will also do some exercise, and I'll give you hopefully some practical tips, and at the end we will have time for question and answers, and please feel free to ask any question you like. So what is emotional well-being? So to reach a level of well-being, we need to find a sense of achievement in our life, set some goals for ourselves. How can we feel the achievement? Trying to reach those goals step by step. Feel close and connected with other people, especially during this time. You might be isolating, you might be restricted to your own county, or you might be working from home. You're not connecting to people as usual. So try to look at for all the connections, trying to increase the connections that you have right now. And find some activities that give you pleasure, that make you feel happy. Perhaps are activities that you haven't done in a long time, something that you're giving up because you didn't have time, so you can look at those again. So the combination of all these areas, and perhaps some others, can give you a good balance and a good well-being, especially from an emotional point of view. Let's look at what the emotions are versus the feeling. So we say the body informs the mind. I'll give you an example of how this works. So I'm threatened by something in my life, or threatened by something in the environment, or something happening at work. I experience the fear. I feel the fear in the body, and I feel the horror as a consequence of it. So that's a feeling, and it's in my mind. So the body experiences the emotion. So what's the emotion? Is a physical state or a body sensation. It starts in a particular area of the the brain, the amygdala. So it's a different part of the brain where the feelings start. And it's also interesting to notice that it starts before the feeling. It's triggered usually by external stimuli. And how we can recognize it? We can observe it through some of the physical reactions that we might have, some physical pains, some reaction, some impulsive reaction that we might have. So the feelings. So the body then informs the mind. So what are the feelings? So the mental associations. So it's the reactions that our body has. It starts in a different part in the brain, in the cerebrum. They're very brief and episodic, so something to remember. They are not permanent. They're not long term. They are short, and you can definitely remind that to yourself. That's a good tip to cope with it. They help us interpret the emotions, and they varies on the person experience, on the person perception of it. So we said in the example, I might feel horror. Someone else says I might feel terrified. I feel shame. So it could be a completely different feeling. This is an interesting exercise that my clients, the people I work with, find very interesting. It was created by a psychotherapist, Wilcox, and you can see a very long time ago, but it's still a very useful tool. So it's a feeling wheel. So some people tell me they're not able to recognize their feelings. They're not able to describe them. They come and go. They're so fast, as we said earlier. They are brief. So becoming aware and naming them, being able to recognize them and name them is a very important step. So in this wheel, so you see the middle, the center of it, where the primary feelings are, and on the outer rings there are all the secondary feelings. So this little wheel can help you perhaps recognize them, to name them. I always recommend my clients, to have it accessible, to look at it from time to time if they struggle to recognize some of the feelings, or to want to understand where they come from. How can we manage our emotions? So we said the emotion starts before the feelings. So let's try to go, back to the beginning of this process. One way of doing it is to retrain the brain, trying to get the brain to use the frontal part of our brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex. So the amygdala, what we were talking earlier, the area that activates all the emotions, activates the fight and flight response, sending out emotion messages. So to prevent this to occur regularly, we can slow down the process. We can't stop it. None of our organs in the brain can actually be stopped, because otherwise, we wouldn't be alive. So we can, we can slow it down. So it has been proved that if one organ is activated and works faster, the other one, might slow down, because they don't work at the same speed at the same time. So one way is by slowing down the breathing, for example. That's one of the most important things to do. Counting, perhaps any exercise that involves counting, any other exercise that involves a rational exercise, something that involves, for example, doing crosswords, doing Sudoku. Different clients have come up with different exercises about this, but anything that activates your rational mind. Okay, so let's try to do a little exercise together, and you can do this at home by yourself. It's very simple, and it's just a breathing exercise. So just for a minute, just get comfortable on your chair. Notice your breathing. You're breathing in and out slowly. Do you notice any physical sensation, any physical pain while you're breathing? Perhaps it's in your stomach, in your chest, in your shoulders. Continue to breathe in and out, a little bit deeper if you can. And now while you breathe in, I will count from 1 to 6. So try to follow the breathing and stay with me until I count from 1 to 6. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold on your breath for a couple of seconds. 7, 8, 9, 10, and now try to exhale. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How did you get on? Did you manage to go through? Did you manage to follow the pace? Was it too fast for you? Did you have to stop halfway? That's fine. What did you notice during this process? And if you were closing your eyes, please reopen them, maybe shake your body a little bit to come back to the room. Okay, so this is just a very simple exercise that you could do, okay, to slow down your thinking, to slow down your emotions. You might find that it's very difficult to count backwards at the same time as you're breathing. But that focuses your attention, focuses your mind, and it slows down your breathing even more. Something to practice. Perhaps you want to do it by counting forward, and then when you get familiar with it, you start counting backwards. But it's a very, very useful exercise with any type of emotions that you are experiencing and that you want to control. The breathing is the most important thing. The numbers are just helping to activate the prefrontal cortex, the other part of the brain, and slow down the amygdala. Okay, so I hope that was useful, and I hope you can practice in your own time. So let's move on to sadness. What is sadness? How we experience it on a social level or interpersonal level? What are the factors influencing our sadness? They're usually stressful events in our life. It could be a loss. It could be an humiliation from a colleague, from a manager at work, from a friend. It could be, you know, you lost a job, you lost a friend, you lost a relationship. There are some other impact from external stressor, such as, you know, poverty, injustice in the world, things that are in the environment. At a personal or interpersonal level, some people might be more vulnerable to it than others. They might get more upset than others about the things happening around them. They feel a lack of social support, or they might consider the support that they're given not helpful. The negative self-concept, that's very important to monitor, you know, doubting of positive feedback. Feedback is there to encourage us to, you know, to improve. A feeling of hopelessness, so feeling that there's nothing you can do, you don't have motivation of energy. So at a personal level, that's what you might experience when you feel sadness. How can you cope with it? How can you manage some of this situation a bit better? We need to put the effort, and we need to rely on a strategy. Find a strategy, useful strategy. What the strategy might be, they're very different from person to person. People come up with, you know, different ideas, lighting a candle, you know, boiling the water, having a tea, relaxing, lying down on the bed, doing some mindfulness exercises. Everyone has a different way of dealing with it, but we need to put the effort. And we need to believe that that strategy will work. Perhaps it takes some time. Reward ourselves for the success that we have, even if it's just little success, little steps. Rather than just saying, oh, I was lucky that time. Oh, my friend helped me. My therapist helped me. You did the work yourself. Even if you see a therapist, the therapist only is giving you a guideline, is giving you the skills, the tools, is looking for the tools together with you. But it's your own success. If you fail, continue to believe in the success. There will be some success. You know, when you do something the first time, it's always difficult. You might fail, you might make errors, you learn from those experiences. Unfortunately, there are uncontrollable events happening around us. COVID is one of them. Okay, we might feel a sense of helplessness towards other people or the situation we're in. and thinking that there is no, we don't have a strategy, there's no success, that there's no way out, can only lead you to some depression. So mind yourself from getting to that point. How can we cope with sadness? So feeling sad for other people's suffering. So that's what's happening a lot these days during COVID. There's an interesting article you can see at the end of the slide, the dark side to feeling other people's emotion. You can find it. I put the link down there. It's an interesting article to read. It says to us that empathy is good, but when we try to step into someone else's shoes, can be very difficult. And if we do that regularly, day after day after day, we listen to the news, for example, and we start empathizing and feeling the sadness of other people in the world dying, family members passing away. We feel that sadness, and it can be overwhelming. So looking at it with compassion instead. What is compassion? Feeling concerned for other people, but having some motivation to help them. You don't need to fully step into their shoes. You can help in whatever way you can. A small help is sufficient. So extending kindness towards the others. I encourage you to read that article, and probably you might find some other articles recently that are very interesting about, how people are experiencing the pandemic. It can be useful to hear other people's experiences and, and read things like that. So at the beginning of the pandemic this year, we had a psychologist, a psychotherapist, Aris, that specialized in acceptance and commitment therapy, so-called the ACT, and he came up with this little exercise called Face COVID. So some practical steps for connecting with others. So we're gonna go through them quickly. So I say quickly because I uploaded there the link, so you can have a look at your own time. There is a good explanation there, about 5 pages, but it's worth reading it. So it explains how to go through each step. So FACE, the F stands for focus on what's in your control. So we're not in control of the future, for example. We're not in control of what's going to happen with COVID, what the government is going to do, what the economy is going to be, what the restrictions are. So try to do what you can do in the here and now. Acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. So just, accept them, see them, passing through your mind, and notice them. Observe your inner world. Come back into your body then. Connect with your body. Are you trying to find any escape? Do you notice anything in your body? Perhaps every time you watch the news, you have that little, feeling in your tummy. Engage in what you're doing. So try to refocus the attention to what you're doing. If you find yourself spending too much time watching the news, what am I doing now? Ask that question to yourself. What's useful for me to do right now? Look at the smells around the room, and look at the environment. My colleague, again, a few weeks ago did a very practical exercise around that. So you can watch, it was in the first webinar, you can watch that video, you know, it can help you to ground yourself. COVID, so committed action. So be committed to what you're trying to achieve. So when I said focus your attention and try to be committed with some action. And that action includes self-care. That's very, very important, you know, your self-care. Opening up. So opening up your feelings. Be kind to yourself. You can't stop them, as we said, so acknowledge them. And I give you an interesting example here. You know, remember when you were on a plane, you're taking off on a flight, and they say the assistant, the flight assistant says, in case of emergency, put on a mask yourself first. So if you don't help yourself, you can't help the others. Okay, so it's a similar example here. If you can't help yourself, if you're struggling yourself, you can't help others. Look at the values. What are your values? What always been your values? I'm sure that during this time, during COVID, there are a lot of obstacles that you might find along the way. Can you still live your values? Maybe in a different way, temporarily, because of the restrictions. So you might have to adjust them, but can I still live them in some way? Identify the resources. Do you have some resources? Support around you? Is that enough? Reach out to people. That's very important if you feel like you need support. And the D for COVID there, disinfect and distance. Follow the guidelines. You know, that's all you can do. So we pass on to shame. Experiencing shame. This is another emotion that, you know, is coming up a lot in this pandemic. What is shame? Do you feel like you want to hide? Do you feel humiliated or distressed? A lot of thoughts going through your head about regretting a behavior, a situation, an action, something that you did. Do you feel rejected by other people, isolated? Because you you know, you don't feel like joining them or joining the social group at the moment. Some things can't be changed. So it's something about the past that you experience shame about, and I'm mentioning that because a lot of people have a lot of time to think about this, so there could be shame coming from a situation, something that happened in the past. You can't change the culture, you can't change the regulations if they are thoughts that are outside your control. Just be aware that it's something that at the moment you can't change. What are the causes for having these negative emotions such as regret, guilt, shame? So when we feel regret, we imagine things could turn out, hoping that they could turn out differently. When we feel guilty, there's a lot of self-criticism going on for something, for an action, or for the belief that we don't harm to others. We feel shame. We tend to think about counterfactual or alternative thoughts to try to justify the experience. I feel that way because my friend rang me because he told me that. Exploring shame. So we might feel terrible because we feel I must have done something horribly wrong. Perhaps you did something that you could have done differently, but you can't change the past. You can take responsibility for it. Feeling terrible is probably, not necessary. It's going to make you feel overwhelmed. Having said that, there are 2 articles there as well that I posted the link. You can read at your own time. And they go through some examples of how in this pandemic, this feeling of responsibility and guilt have been amplified by people around us, by family, by friends, and by the social media. One of the articles described the experience of a girl contracting COVID, feeling ashamed about it. And of course, being diagnosed with COVID might make you think, where did I contract it? How did that happen? What people will think about it? People will speculate about it. You might receive lots of texts from friends telling you it's your fault. But remember that shame can also prevent people from calling a GP when they don't feel well. So something to think about, and there is a lot of more information in those articles and real life experiences of people that have gone through the illness. Some of the other interventions that you can look at when trying to cope with shame, if you'd like to the intervention of a therapist, you can ask, I'd like to explore what's happening to me. There are different type of therapy, different type of approaches, so try to be clear, explain exactly what you'd like to focus on. If it's a problem is in a relationship, you feel shame because of a relationship going on at the moment with some of your family members or friends, and certainly that has changed during COVID. So very important things to look at. Recognize those negative feelings. That's a therapy that can help you recognize them. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help you identify those automatic or unconscious thoughts. And as we mentioned throughout a lot of our webinar, mindfulness can be very useful exercise just to relax and to ground yourself, and you can find a lot of videos available online. Other techniques for coping with shame, you can have a look. I posted this just a little summary of a self-compassion exercise. You can find it, as you can see, on Get Self-Help. The link is there below, and just a little image that can encourage you to notice your tricky brain. So our brain is constantly criticizing, is constantly looking for alarming things, danger. It's how our brain works. Slowing down with the breathing, we've done the exercise before. Treat yourself like the others. Have compassion for yourself and for the others. Have a kind mind to yourself. Be mindful of your thoughts. Look at how you're talking to yourself. What's the communication, your internal communication, the communication with yourself? Is that negative? Can I change that? Self-care, very important element. The image. So develop a compassionate image of yourself, a different version of yourself. If you can't find it, idealize what you'd like to be, or you see someone, you have a friend that that, you know, has that compassionate, natural way of doing things. How could you be that person and create your own compassionate image? Humanity. So just be aware that we can't escape from the pain, from the suffering, from COVID at the moment. And trying to find that compassionate instinct within you, because, you know, as a human being, we all have it. Find simple ways to help the others. Create a kit bag for yourself, a kit bag which we talked about earlier, a kit bag of resources. Some of the other exercises here, we won't be able to go through them all, but I just put them there. You can just take the title, Compassionate Imagery, Google it, and you'll find the exercises available online. You can choose an image of compassion. Change yourself in a way that you can look like someone else that you feel like is having those qualities. Try to become the best version you can of yourself. Another interesting exercise, color visualization and breathing. Think of a color that represents an emotion. Let's take anger there, for example. Anger, I associate anger with blue. And I associate calmness with red, or the other way around. You could pick another color. Okay, breathe in, close your eyes, and try to think that you're breathing in blue. When you breathe out, slowly think you're breathing out in red. Just a simple exercise to let go of the emotion. Transforming a bad feeling. So where do you feel the feeling in yourself, in the body? What shape does it have? If you were to give it a shape, is it in your belly? Does it have a squared shape, an oval shape? What size is it? Is it big, small, really large? What color is it? Black, blue, red, green. Try to give it a better shape to it. To be better, that feeling to be better, what would it look like? How does it need to be? Does it need to be more rounded, smaller, different color? Try to have a think about these exercises in your own time. These simple exercises that you can go through by yourself. Experiencing anger. This is the other emotion that we're covering today. So have you been treated unfairly? Did others not respect the COVID rules these days? And that make you feel really annoyed about it? Do different situations feel the same? Perhaps you felt angry in one situation a month ago when someone said something. Now someone else is saying something quite similar and you feel anger again. So do you go, what's the urge? You feel the urge to react. So anger might be just an objection to unfairness. So I feel something is unfair, so I react with an anger. I feel some of the regulation, the COVID regulation are unfair. I feel very angry. Can you change the regulation? That's something you can't really change. Can you change your feeling about it? Yes. Sometimes we feel a responsibility of blaming others, blaming other things, as I was mentioning before, to find a reason why something happened. Let's try to take responsibility. Let's try to reflect on our values and our belief of what is moral. Something is making you angry. Maybe you need to evaluate what are your beliefs. Can you minimize the blame to others and the unfairness that you feel? Just some questions, and very relevant question you can reflect, you know, especially in this time about COVID. When we look at the anger, the cycle of it, there's always a triggering event, some negative thoughts going around, an emotional response, a physical response in the body, and then we behave in a way. Our response might be associated to the anger, a consequence, a reaction to the anger. This is something I always discuss with my clients, and the fact that anger is not a primary emotion. So it's a response to a primary emotion. So look at the iceberg. Okay, so the anger is just the tip of the iceberg. What's underneath? What's going on for me underneath? Do I feel lonely? And that's why I'm getting angry at all these regulations about COVID. So trying to see what's underneath, what's going on for you. Is any pattern, any triggers, warning signs? So try to explore and notice these things. So that's the way to cope with it. How do I react when I feel angry? And I become so used to being angry that I don't even think about it. What do I say when I'm angry? Do I say certain things? Do I always react in the same way? What are the most annoying situations for me at the moment? How does my family react with anger? Did I perhaps learn to respond in that way? So there is a little picture there that just gives you, you can read it in your own time, it just gives you an idea of some of the triggers, so some of the warning signs to watch out for. There could be other, that's, you know, just a small list, but recognizing them is very important. Any pattern you might find. Think about how you could react differently. A few weeks ago in one of my other webinars about fear and worry, we done an exercise called stop. So stop, reflect, and look at the helicopter view. Could I think of it differently? We spent a number of minutes doing that exercise together. So if you wish, you can go back, refer to the other webinar and have a look at it. It's very relevant and useful when dealing with anger as well. What do I look like when I'm angry? Do you recognize any of those, your faces? Do you recognize yourself? Look at yourself in the mirror if you don't know. So you feel the anger, go to the mirror. How do you look like? From recent studies of psychology has actually come becoming more evidence that facial expressions can actually help change our mood, our feelings, and ultimately our emotions. So as you remember, I said they start first. So smiling, for example, just the movement of the smile can activate certain muscle, can activate the amygdala, can change your mood, and it's a simple muscle movement. Use some of the triggers, so if you can recognize, notice them, so you have a list of them, review them daily. Maybe you can add something so you can recognize them faster. The faster you recognize them, the quicker you can intervene. You might want to avoid one or two. You might make changes to your routine or your lifestyle in order to deal with them. That's fine. Or have a plan B. If you really need to face it, that's okay. Have a plan B. You can keep the activity short, but having the plan B is probably a very good option. For example, you need to meet a friend. You need to go to a shopping center. You haven't been in a place, in a social environment for a long time. Try to keep that short. Just expose yourself to it. So what's your plan B if there are too many people there? If I get there and there are too many people, maybe I just come back home. So we look in advance, you know, what's the next bus available. You know, maybe you're driving, but you know, plan for yourself, you know, the situation, if the situation turns out to be too overwhelming for you. I'm sure you found yourself in an unpleasant situation before in the past. How did you manage it before? That's always very useful. And finally, I just want to mention before I finish forgiveness. Forgiveness is the decision to overcome pain that was inflicted by a situation or by other people, by another person. It's about letting go the emotion, letting go the anger, the resentment, shame. So trying to view the person who has inflicted the pain to us with compassion. So we got coming back to compassion again. It's very difficult. You know, you might say to me, and I know many clients I work with say to me, it's not fair. The thing is, if you continue to feel the anger, you're just gonna feel overwhelmed. And it's not going to help. So looking at forgiveness, how can forgiveness help us deal with the anger? Evaluating the pro and cons of forgiving. What are the consequences if I'm forgiving this person? One of the main consequences is you're not feeling that overwhelming sensation for yourself. You're probably not in touch with that person anymore. That person that might have told you it's all your fault that, you know, you got COVID or someone else got COVID. Explore your feelings, how they changed over time. Did your worldview change, your behavior changed over time because of the resentment or the anger? So what was my previous way of seeing the world, of doing things? So go back to, you know, things, how you were doing things in the past, and that can definitely make you move forward. Okay, so I hope this is the end of my presentation. I hope that was useful. So if there is any questions now, I'll be very happy to answer. Feel free to ask. There's no right or wrong questions. Feel free to ask anything you like, and I'll pass it on to Gronia to read out any of the questions.
Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. And thank you as well for the breathing exercise. I found that really helpful myself. So we've actually quite a lot of questions to get through, so I won't delay. So firstly, this person hasn't given their name, but they've said they have a lot of negative feelings towards a family member for something that happened many years ago. And they know that it's not doing them any good, but they're finding it very hard to let go of it. So they were very hurt about this thing at the time, and they're looking to see what you would advise them to do about it, Annalisa.
It's a very good question. It is a very, very difficult thing to do. You know, what I mentioned in towards the end of my presentation there, forgiveness is probably something that's going to help you to deal with it. I know um, you feel like, you know, it wasn't your fault. It's not fair to forgive, especially if you know, something serious or something that had a big impact on your life. But certainly living with that anger towards those people is not going to help you feel um, comfortable, feel happy with yourself. Um, so trying to think, you know, to self-care and think of yourself, forgiving is something that make you feel better about the situation.
Excellent, Annalisa. Thank you very much for that. The next question is from Anne, and she says that she is inclined to take on other people's problems quite a lot, trying to fix them, and it's wearing her out, she says. And she's wondering, have you any suggestions as to what she can do?
Hi, Anne. Very good question. Yes, we often tend to do that. You know, if you have a good heart, you know, we look to help the others. But as I mentioned earlier on in my presentation, we really need to self-care. We need to help ourselves first. Remember the example that I gave about an emergency situation on a plane. You put your mask on first, and then you support the others. It's difficult to say no, okay, if someone is asking for help, but I think you need to find a way of minding yourself in that, and saying, okay, I can give you a little support with this, you know, but I'm also struggling in this moment. Make the person aware of your own struggles at the same time as you're giving them support. Okay.
Great, thank you very much, Annalisa. Another person who hasn't given us their name, coming from another culture, this person finds it difficult sometimes that there is no space for their feelings even within the relationship. And they're saying, stop dwelling, they get to hear often. Irish people are not used to talking about their feelings, so for them it is easier to just not address them and ignore them. And so this person is wondering, how do they deal with that? Because they feel that they're not allowed to be themselves, and as a result they often feel lonely and misunderstood when they get a response like, you know, don't dwell on it. And have you any tips for that?
There are two perspectives. It's very, very good question. Thank you for asking that. There are two perspectives that you can take. And I suppose from one point of view, it's important that your partner understands that you're from a different culture. It's not only, we were talking earlier on, you know, at social level, interpersonal level, we might, you know, react to things in one way or another, but there is also a cultural element. You know, we grew up with, you know, we've been raised in a family where we react to things happening in a certain way. So it's very difficult to change those one day to the other. Yes, we can, you know, look at making some little changes over time, because we might recognize that some aspect of our culture or some ways in which we were raised might not be, you know, the best way. So yes, we can slightly change those, but it takes time. So the expectation, you know, from your partner needs to be that that process might be slow, and you need support to change it. From your own side, I suppose, if you clashing with the other person in relation to cultural mentality or ideals or values, it's important that you point that out. You know, these are your values, these are my values, and you know, how can we find a compromise in what we do? So you know, you said you don't feel understood or listened to. Um, so obviously you need to try and find a compromise. You can change a little bit, you know, if you can, but mind yourself as well, because you know, to consider, am I perhaps analyzing my emotions too much, my feelings? You know, am I creating worries that are not actual worries? I have spoken about this in the previous webinar about fear and worries as well. Is this worry real? Is it happening right now? Or it's hypothetical? Am I thinking about the future? What if, you know, that person calls me and tells me I was wrong, I shouldn't have gone out today because you know, I didn't bring the mask or something, you know, similar. Um, so try to evaluate as well your own worries and values, so you can take two different perspectives. I hope my answer helps.
That's great, Annalisa. That sounded very good for me. I've two more questions here. They don't give their name, but I'm actually going to give them to you together because they're quite similar. And
Okay.
then we've two more left after that. So of necessity, we'll probably have to be brief. So the first of these is any suggestions for handling outbursts of anger. I'm often feeling that the outburst is justified and then end up seething for a long period afterwards. Any techniques to think first? And the second question, again from someone who hasn't given us their name, I'm getting angry within when a trigger is being activated from 0 to 110 within seconds. So it feels nearly impossible to control it. How do I stop it in the moment and take a step back instead of being overpowered by emotion? So obviously those two questions are quite similar, Annalisa. So I'll hand over to you.
Perfect. Yeah. Excellent. So thank you for asking those questions, very relevant. I'm going to start from the second one because I think you know, it begins first. So in the process of experiencing anger, so something that you know, triggers you and you respond very quickly by impulse. So it's about slowing down. We went through the exercise earlier. It's about trying to hold yourself from responding. Um, you know, trying to count, for example, in your head, giving yourself time before you respond, before you act. There is also, I don't know your age and of course, but I just want to mention that happens a lot in teenager age, you know, it's to be much longer, so up to your mid-20s or late 20s. So there is also, you know, a suggestion that the the amygdala is not fully developed before your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the brain, is fully developed until your late 20s. So if you're very young and you find yourself that, just be aware that, you know, it's normal. It's absolutely normal that you react in that way. To manage it, again, slowing down is the most important thing. The other question was in relation to, you know, dwelling on it or ruminating on it, if you want, continuing to think about it. You know, I felt angry and I still feel I can't get out of this. You know, it still annoys me so much. So finding ways that help you deal with it. What helped in the previous situation? What was helpful for you in the past? I'm sure you were in one situation where you felt angry, but you managed to overcome it. Practical way, what can you do about it? So I have a look again at some of the exercises that we went through. The stop exercise you can Google, you know, and again helps you. It's called stop, STOPP. You can find a lot of exercises online. You know, it just helps you to step back, look at the bigger picture, um, and reflect on it before you act. And the other exercise that can help you is, you know, it's probably you need to start focusing on other thing, refocus your attention to something else. Perhaps especially at the moment we have a lot of time at hand, we're focusing, we're thinking about, you know, what went on in that situation, because there aren't other situations happening. There's not a lot happening in our life because of COVID, perhaps because you're isolated. So try to again to reach that emotional well-being balance, you know. Look at your achievements, look at your the activities that you're doing at the moment. Can I refocus? Can I introduce some new goals in my life, some other type of pleasure in my life? Okay, I hope that answers those questions.
That's terrific, Anna. Thank you very much. And sorry, I'm rushing you now because I'm just very conscious of time, and we've two more questions here. So this is from, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, L-E-L-E, or might be L-A. I'm curious, how do psychotherapists mind themselves in these difficult times, and how can they be always emotionally and mentally available for others when they are experiencing the same restrictions and difficulties as everybody else?
Very good question, and it is absolutely more difficult for us as well. You know, I can't deny that, absolutely. We've been trained to manage this situation. We've been trained to, you know, self-care. So we've gone through that training. For us is about, you know, emphasizing on that and trying to make sure that we do that a little bit more than normal.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And the last question before we wrap up for today, this person hasn't given us their name, but they say, when I share how I feel with people, so for example, sad, low or lonely, they tend to think that I'm asking them to solve my problems, even though I say I just want to get it off my chest. And I have to say, I've had that experience myself personally. I want someone to listen and comfort me and understand how I'm feeling. So they don't necessarily want the other person to fix them. And they're wondering, how can they communicate this better to the other person?
Excellent point. Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. That occurs all the time. It's almost as we feel the responsibility to having to respond. Remember when I was talking earlier on about the moral responsibility, we think that we need to respond, we need to give advice, and it's not about giving advice. And same as therapy, you know, it's not about giving advice, it's about listening. So it's about listening to what the other person has to say, trying to be too much empathic. I'm going back to that article that I was talking about earlier, especially during pandemic, you know, might not be helpful. The person is just, you know, looking for a safe space to talk, and you know, and encourage those people, and you know, everyone, that because we do have that instinct, we feel that responsibility having to respond. So I encourage people just to step back and just listen, and you know, and 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 perhaps just give a hand to the other person. That's all, that's all they need. So I believe they are all the questions. So I want also, before I pass it on to you, Gronia, to wish everyone a very happy Christmas. Hopefully you'll be able to connect with family and friends within regulations. And thank you for attending today.
Annalisa, as always, thank you very much for a really fantastic presentation. And those questions were really quite something. And I hope that the people who asked them found the answers to be of use and of help. So I won't delay very long, just to remind you all that all 4 webinars will be on YouTube, MyMind's YouTube channel by the middle of next week. 3 of them are there already. We plan a second series early in 2021, so please do keep an eye on our social media channels and our website for that information. I'd like to thank everybody who attended during the course of the webinar, and a special thank you to all of the therapists who, as I say, gave so freely, above and beyond the call of duty, of their time and energy on this, the first of MyMind's webinar series. So without further ado, I wish you all a very safe and peaceful Christmas. I wish you peace and prosperity for 2021. And we hope that the year that we've had will be no more, and we can move on in safety and comfort into the new year. So until we meet again, please stay safe and look after each other. Thank you.